So this is new Tablefield, which is the city I've been building in City Skylines recently. It's an unfinished European style city. Um, the idea is that currently I'm really just working on the old part of the city. The idea is that I'll build some like more modern stuff around it eventually to try and like make it fit in. But I figured starting with the old city makes more sense in terms of actually designing a city, but it's taken me a long time. I'm almost certainly never going to finish any of this, but I mean, you don't have to, right? That's not the fun part. Anyway, so I don't know. I've used a bunch of different influence to get like the sort of designs that I wanted to do. Thrown in a bunch of different ideas. For example, so you can see that there's big star fortifications on the boundaries of the city. Um, kind of I was kind of making this thinking of like Nicosia in Cyprus as like the main um, influence for these star bastions, like being like surrounding the city. Even though a lot of cities did have these sorts of things, none of them really exist anymore. Um, yeah, so you can see I've used this like wall mod to get these. It is very sloped, so I'm not sure how useful it would be as an actual wall, because you could probably climb up it relatively easy if you were trying to storm the battlements, but I don't really care. That's not what I'm going for. You can also see that like this trench wall asset, which I've had to put in the corners, is I mean, it kind of defeats the purpose of having these lines of fire down the side because I've got this big thing sticking out in the way, but I don't really care again because I had to build the starfort somehow and I didn't want big ugly gaps in my wall. So, I mean, again, it's like not really. It's not meant to be that accurate, right? Because like the idea is that it's a long time after these would have been in any way useful. So the only reason they're here is because no one's bothered to take them down. Um, but parts of the fortifications obviously would have been destroyed, like around here, where they've had to make way for like highways and rails and stuff like that. So that's kind of the angle I'm going for with this city. It's meant to be like a modern city built on an old city. I'm kind of just working on the old city at the moment. You can see that even though it's City Skylines, which everyone knows is a traffic management game, um, the road layout in this city is appalling. It's just in no way efficient, and it's just terrible. And you can see I got these streetcars which kind of go around the city. Um, but yeah, so these I've just got like weird angles going on and like stupid corners, and there's no sort of channeling of traffic. You just go the most direct way you can, and everyone gets stuck in certain roads. But I felt it kind of seemed a bit authentic in terms of how this city was laid out, because I felt as though um, it's that sort of we built the roads before we had any idea about you know what we were doing in terms of building decent road systems, um, which is something you see in a lot of these cities. So yeah, the rest of the city I'll probably build a bit more sensibly if I ever get to it, which I won't. Remember, we were talking about that before. Um, but yeah, so there's also the citadel over here, which I've called Fort Hunter for some reason. I haven't screwed around with like complicated bastions or anything. Um, it's like even with this wall, I didn't bother with like any ravelins or tenails or like even a glacis, just because I mean it doesn't really make sense to put them in city skylines, and I couldn't really be bothered screwing around that much with like um, terrain and shit like that. So yeah, so this is Fort Hunter. You can see the asset in the middle, this like fort asset. I mean, it's not the best asset anyone's ever made. You can see the texturing's a bit kind of odd, and it's made of like three polygons. Um, but I think it sort of fits. I don't know. It looks almost a bit out of place, but it also I quite like it being there. You can see there's also like just parking areas. I got these old barrackses which look really awesome, and just set up this like this old barracksy area. And then I got a church over here which I added in. Um, I don't know why. I'm not sure a church makes that much sense being up there. And this Museum of Military History, which is a pretty cool asset, I think, and it fits well in the Star Fort. You can see this is the approach to the Star Fort. It's just like a raised mound, and I've gone a bit nuts with these rocks because, I don't know, the rocks look really good, but I haven't really used them in this part of the city at all because it doesn't really make sense to have gigantic quarryable stone faces in a flat, you know, 1,000-year-old city. Um, so most of the assets I've been screwing around with are mostly gardens. Probably have too many gardens. I should have more like plazas and stuff like that. But, whatever. So here's the city center. Um, so these two areas here. I've got this big city hall sort of thing, surrounded by all these botanical gardens. Actually, they don't look that botanical. They look more like, just palace gardens, but whatever. And then I got these palaces here flanking the thing. A big statue here. I quite like the way that turned out. So you can see I spent. Was the first area I sort of worked on with the with just downloading a bunch of like assets and just building the assets myself, which I quite enjoyed. Um, and then you get around to here, we've got like the what is it, the Rudolfinum in Prague, which is like the opera house. And then I've got this theatre, which is just the generic theatre from the European assets. And I've also got this statue of someone from Skyrim who I never played Skyrim, but it looks pretty cool. Um, so you come to here, Plaza of the Dead works kind of well across from the cathedral. You got this big angel in it. The cathedral's, I don't know, I quite like it. It's just the default City Skylines one. You've also got this government house, which was the actual city hall from City Skylines. I've just sort of put it on a block, built some gardens around it. I think it's pretty cool. Anyway, get over here. This is the station. It's meant to be like the old station because the idea is that eventually I'll build these lines around, and if I ever do build the rest of the city, I'll put like a big central modern station somewhere. But the idea is that this is the old historical terminus of all the lines leading to this city. So I just whacked a few different buildings together. You can see I've got the old station, and I've demoted the Rijksmuseum from Amsterdam to being a station house, and I've also demoted the Elizabeth Tower, or whatever it is, from the Westminster Palace to just being a clock tower and a station. But yeah, additionally, this asset, which is just an elementary school, which I found on the workshop, I left this in, even though there are a few issues I had with it. It's quite a nice asset, and it blends well with the European house style. But it's just too big, right? And this is an issue that a lot of the assets that people make have. So you can see this is like a 6-story building, and this is like a 5-story building. And the 5-story building is just like a lot bigger than, well, not a lot bigger, but big in it, like, it sort of looks too big to fit neatly into the street. And there were a lot of other assets I had where they were like big, there were these like 4-story buildings which are like big palace buildings, and people have just made them like so big that they take up like an entire block. So it's like you look at a person standing next to these assets, and like the front door and the windows are like 20 times taller than the person, and it just looks terrible. So there are a bunch of assets I've just had to not deal with because the person who made the asset didn't scale it properly. Yeah, so that's basically the main part of the city. You get to this. You've also got this I forget what I called it. What is it? The Avenue of the Victorious, um, which is this big boulevardy like line that runs all the way through the city. Um, and so I've got like the what do you call them? I forget what you call them. Yeah, those things. Trams. And then you got a big roundabout up here, and the trams go around the roundabout. And there's these two big obelisky monument things. I forget where these are from. Wellington Monument. I don't know. I think they're from Ireland or something. I'm not sure exactly where. But the idea is that this is a sort of like, that sort of 19th century monumental shit that a lot of people in Europe built, where they like, I don't know, they just built giant palaces to weird romantic ideals. Um, One thing I will say is that it's hard to build things that aren't phallic in city skylines. So you can see even when I just had this, it looked like a dick, and then I like added this part and it looked like a dick, and it's like I've just resigned myself to this part of the city looking like a dick, because apparently that's how it works. So yeah, the idea of this is I kind of based this avenue idea off like Wilhelmshöhe in Kassel, which is a city in Germany, and also to some extent the Australian War Memorial in Canberra, where you've got this at the edge of the city there's a big axis that you can look down, um, and then there's these big monumental structures near the end of it, and then they lead up into the hills behind. So you can see that there's gardens behind here. All of these trees, I'm going to turn into actual decent looking woods at some point. Right now I've just put some like placeholder trees to give me an idea of where the woods will be. Um, so this will come up here, you get to this triumphal arch, which is pretty cool looking. Um, then that comes up to here, there's like this road, and then initially I wanted this to be like grass, but it was a bit too steep for that, so the idea was people would just walk up it. I'll probably turn it into like windy paths that people can walk up. And then this leads up to the Siegersäule from the Tiergarten in Berlin, um, which is the big top of the hill monument I decided I would settle on for this sort of structure. You can see around this side there's a nice windy road which I put in. I like to make sure that there's no excessively steep areas that roads have to go up because it just looks dodgy. I've also got this rail line which like sort of cuts through the woods with a tree in the middle of the track for some reason, and then goes into this nice old tunnel. Someone made a really nice asset for that, and I put some more rocks around there as well. So yeah, you come up to this. I've called it Pollingston Heights. Apparently, come up to here, and then this looks over the city. And then around here you can come up, and at the very corner there's like Neuschwanstein, which I've also renamed. So Neuschwanstein is like, I don't know. At the moment it looks kind of out of place and stuff, but I'm going to put like trees and probably make this a bit more cliffy, or at least make it fit in better with the mountain. Um, and so yeah, that's kind of where I was going with the with this sort of with this axis of the city, which is quite cool. I quite like this area. Um, but yeah, one thing I was doing was I said before that I finally settled on the Siegersäule as my big thing on the top of the hill. I experimented with um, a lot of other assets, like for example this triumphal arch. I was also considering putting up the top of the hill, but another thing which I kind of wanted to work, but it just didn't in the end, was in Volgograd. There's a big statue on a hill commemorating the Battle of Stalingrad. It's I've moved it over here because it makes more sense to put it over here, because I mean holy shit, this asset is this is like proper size and stuff, but this is huge and it just looks way too out of place being as big as it is. I think it's like the Motherland Calls in Russian. I can't remember what it's actually called. uh, Rodina Mat Zoyet Mash Mashtab. Yeah, I think it's like, I mean, it says up here, Homeland Mother is calling. This is the one-to-one one though, so this is actual size. There were some other assets that came with it. For example, so this one's smaller. Even this one, when I put it up here, it's just huge, and it kind of like, I think it was the castle specifically, which I didn't want to dwarf by having a gigantic statue on the top of the hill. Um, so I kind of gave up on that. But so this is the one I have at the harbour. This is like the one-to-one, like actual size statue. Um, and it, oops, oh my god, don't know what's happening there. Anyway, you can see that when I put it there, it just even makes this area look small. So I was like, I couldn't deal with that. Um, but they also made like a huge, like, this is just like, it's just ridiculous. It's like you could never fit this into a city. Well, this the type of city I'm making, at least comfortably, because it's so big. It's like unbelievable. Um, but yeah, so you've got this line, this train line, which is going to wind up into the mountains. Goes through here, comes along there. I'm probably going to have it come out around here, but I'll have to like dig out this to make it look like more of a valley, because it looks a bit dodgy at the moment, just being sloped. I'll turn it into like a creaky area. But the idea is I want this rail to be like the only rail which comes up along to this sort of hinterland area, which I made when I made this map. Um, the idea behind this is I want it to sort of go around a really scenic route. Okay, sure. Mount Greeley kind of fucks up with the zooming occasionally. Um, but yeah, so I want to have it like come around here, and then up here there's going to be a bunch of touristy stuff. And the idea is I kind of based it off there's a city in North Australia called Cairns, which is like a big tropical city, and up the back of Cairns there's a big hinterland area where there's like some tablelands, and you can get a there used to be a railway which used to be like the only way up to, or like the easiest way up to the hinterlands. It was called the Kuranda Railway, and it's still used as a scenic railway because it just like goes past all these cliffs and all these waterfalls and all that sort of stuff. So I kind of wanted to have a nice railway like that going on, um, and then have this hinterland area which would be all touristy stuff. Like I've got this lake, so I could like sort of surround it with like water activities and stuff like that. This area is all going to be like hopefully city to some extent when I build it. Um, and then over here you've got these, well, you've got this big sand island, which is kind of based off like some of the islands on the other parts of the east coast of Australia, in southern Queensland. So islands like Moreton Island and Stradbroke Island and Fraser Island are all these big sand islands. And I'm considering putting like a military base or something here, like a modern military base. But I mean, again, this is if I ever get to this point, which I'm never going to, because I'm spending my entire life building this part of the city. Um, so yeah, this is what I've been working on in City Skylines.